There you go. So we are today from Turner's house, better called Sandicum Lodge by JMW Turner, the landscape painter. And this is, I will just say a very few words about the house and where we are, because of course, Mark wanted to work in the setting of JMW Turner, which I think is was a very good idea. So Sandicum Lodge is this house here on the screen. I don't know if you have been here before. If you haven't, please do come and visit us.
I want to go.
And
this is Turner's house. Look.
Yeah, it's a very beautiful house, and so it was built and it was designed by JMW Turner. So it's a 3D artwork by the artist. It's a sort, we like to call it like that. And it was his country retreat, basically, a place where he would come and relax. He would not have painted on oil with oil paint like Mark is doing today. So it's something very unusual, that happened in this house. But Turner was a drawaholic, and he will have always sketch on the River Thames, which was his favorite place here in Richmond. I will just show you a couple of images. This is a drawing that was made 1 year after the house was completed by one of Turner's friends, William Avo, a painter of the Royal Academy as well. And as you can see, the house looks pretty the same. So during the restoration, they made sure that the house looked like Turner would have known it. And that was very important. On the right hand side of the screen, you can see a detail of the brickwork of the house that you could see better in this picture. That was a great discovery during the restoration, because as you can see in the image on the left, it doesn't look like, the house doesn't look like having a brickwork, but this type of bricks that were handmade in Brentford, that they were quite expensive, were found during the restoration under the layers and layers of rendering. And also, as you can see, there is a line between the bricks drawn, which is called penny line pointing, and was made with a penny coin by hand all over the house to make the bricks look straight from the distance. So we were pretty sure that the house wasn't meant to be rendered by Turner himself. And finally, just quickly, another little, some sketches of the first idea that Turner had of the house. That was supposed to be something much larger that it looks like today, but the grounds didn't allow him to build anything bigger. So we have this little house instead, with 2 floors and 2 side wings, where Turner lived with his own dad. So his old dad lived here on a permanent basis, while Turner will have done back and forth from central London when he needed to relax. And he will have spent time fishing on the River Thames and sketching as well on his bank. Now, let me introduce you to the other Turner that we have here today, Marc Turner. He is a professional artist, painter, and art tutor. So he knows very well what he's doing today. And he's been painting for many years and have worked for a painting school in Norfolk. In 2017, he opened the Turner's Painting School in Warrington, Cheshire, when he runs regular painting courses and workshops with oil painting. He has a vast knowledge of the master painters, old and new, and have studied their techniques and their medium and the mediums that they used. And these had helped him to develop as an artist and constantly pass on his knowledge to his students. And we are very happy to have him here today, helping us and showing us some of JMW Turner's techniques. Here on the screen, you can see a quote about how he started to love and work with painting, but I will let him telling you a bit more about that later on. And down on the screen, you can see some details about his school and an email address if you wanted to write him. So just before we go to the session today, I want to let you know that on Friday, the 5th of November, between 10 and 2 p.m., this time at the house, so it will be an in-person session. Marc will come back and teach us how to paint this beautiful picture by Turner of the birding of the House of Parliament. The ticket is £60 per person, and all the materials will be included, as well as a live refreshment, and all the session will be in person here at the house, where we make sure that all the COVID safety measure will be in place. So if you want to know more about the next workshop with Marc Turner, you can visit our website www.turnershouse.org at the What's On, or you can write me an email that I will send you later on. I forgot to put on. And finally, here we are to the subject of today's session. So today, Marc will show us how to paint Norham Castle, Sunrise, which is one of Turner's latest pictures. Some people like to say that it's the very last painting that Turner made. We don't know that, because he kept painting until his death. He kept sketching shortly until his death, but he also painted. This picture is quite beautiful. It's one of my personal favorite, and as Tate tell us, of course, Norham sits on the River Tweed in Northumberland, on the border with Scotland. Turner saw this place for the first visited this place for the first time in 1797 when he was only 25, and returned there several times. We know about the 1801 and 1831, where he created. After which he created several artworks. It was one of the sites that Turner loved the most. And as you can see, this one is said to be incomplete, unfinished by the artist, but you might recognize the latest style that Turner was adapting and using in the period. So very abstract almost, and where light covers it all. But now, finally, I will stop sharing, and I will pin this Marc on the screen, and I will leave the word to him. Thank you, Marc.
Hi, welcome everybody. I feel quite privileged to be here at Turner House, guiding you through this painting. I'm only demonstrating this, so I've not got the time. Regardless, thankfully, he never went any further with it, because it's such a beautiful painting as it is, and it's so up to date and so contemporary now. So what I'm going to show you is the techniques. I'll guide you into the techniques and demonstrate this painting. Now, classically, painting would be canvas or board, whatever, and it would have gesso on it. Now this is a board canvas. This is half the size of Turner's original, and when you buy a canvas, it's always got a couple of coats of gesso on. They're not very good coats. They're just sprayed in a factory. I always re-gesso my canvases up to 5 coats. And you can actually feel it and actually see the difference on the edge. For this painting, I've added 10% chalk and 15% marble dust into the gesso. The marble dust gives it that shine. Think of the light coming in and hitting the white of the canvas and bouncing off. With the marble dust, it's like little diamonds. So the light is refracted off in different directions, and it gives you a much whiter glow. From there, classically, we would do what we call, it's an Italian word, it's called an imprimatura. An imprimatura means the colour beginning, the first colour. And I would often cover the whole of my canvas or whatever support I'm painting on with a thin coat of raw sienna. And I would rub that back with a tissue. And that is my imprimatura. This painting of Norham Castle you could say is almost just an imprimatura of different colours. It's different areas of thin paint. And again, the reason that it might have not been a finished painting is because most of Turner's paintings would have started this way, because each layer of paint gives depth in a painting. So if you put a coat of yellow on, the sunlight or the light shines through the yellow onto the white and bounces back through the paint. When you put another coat of paint over an area, that slows that light down. The light has to pass through the two layers of paint to the white of the canvas and then back to your eye. So there's lots of techniques to give you depth in the painting. So let's just get started. I'm just going to show you, I've got, I always use a small palette. I use a small palette because if you use a large palette, you put more paint on it and you waste more paint and you throw it away. All you need is a small amount of paint, size of a pea really. I've got bristle brushes, hog bristle. Now they say that Turner would not have had flat brushes. There's a little, I would disagree with that, because they say that Turner never had the metal ferrules. I would agree with that. But when I make my own brushes and I use feathers and things, I sometimes just happen to get flat brushes. So I'm sure he must have been aware of that when he was making his own brushes or getting them made for him, that some of the brushes were a little bit flat and he would take advantage of that. So we're going to start off with...
Mark, sorry, before you go ahead,
Yes.
Can you please repeat the recipe, for the base that you
For the
used?
gesso.
Yes.
So gesso, if you was going to buy acrylic gesso, then you can add chalk and marble dust to that. You would have to get a bowl and you would have to measure out 15% of chalk dust and 10% of marble dust. Add some cold water to that and whisk it up into a roux as if you were going to do baking. When it's all mixed up into a roux, it's all nice and soft and creamy, then you can add your normal gesso to that and mix that up again with a whisk. If you just put the gesso straight into the chalk dust, it will go lumpy and you'll be forever trying to fight to get the lumps away. Then you would put one coat of gesso onto your canvas horizontally and let that dry for about 2 hours. Then put another coat vertically, let that dry for about 2 hours. And then I tend to go random. And the reason I paint random then is I like to have the lines of thin lines of gesso on my work, refracting that light off in different directions, make it a little bit more dynamic. But if you wish, you can make it smooth by getting some very, very fine 400 grit sandpaper and actually sanding it smooth. That's entirely up to you. I'm sure Turner did that many times. His gesso would have been made with oil paints or with pigments and animal skin glue. Okay, we're going to move on from there. Is that happy with that? Yes,
Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to explain the colours that I've got here. So the colours that I've got here are titanium white. Turner probably would have used lead white, and some people call that flake white. I've got yellow ochre, which is fairly, on this palette, is a fairly warm earth colour. I've got cadmium lemon, that's a cool yellow. I've got cadmium yellow medium, which is a warm yellow. I've got a cool blue of cobalt blue and a warm blue of ultramarine blue. I've got red, again it's an earth pigment, is red iron oxide. You'll probably know it as Venetian red. I've got a paint called Bistra. If you was going to use the equivalent, you'd look for something like a Van Dyke brown or maybe a burnt sienna, probably not quite dark enough. and I've got a small dot of ivory black. A lot of people say they don't use black. I've made different comments on that. Black's amazing if you use it in small amounts. Must have on the palette. Okay, so I'm looking at a picture across from me because I probably can memorize most of this picture. I've also looked at Turner's engravings from his Leader's Norham because they've got details of the mountains and the castle, so you can actually see what's there. So there's a mountain behind here. The castle's sat on a mountain and the valley comes down and through. So by looking at that, it makes this easier to paint. And I'm going to start with my yellow, we'll call it an imprimatura. I've got here linseed oil, and I'm using odorless mineral spirit because there's no smell to it whatsoever. I would say if you're going to use odorless mineral spirit over turpentine, then make sure you've got ventilation through the room. Although you cannot smell it, don't know yet what it's doing. There's still going to be vapors. I'm going to take my linseed oil with a large brush on the center of my palette. I'm going to take a splash of spirit on the palette. So it's nice and wet. And I'm going to take the cool lemon. So that's my yellow that I'm calling a cool yellow. I'll explain that to you as I go along why cool. I've got a scrunched up tissue. Now, when I say a scrunched up tissue, don't have them like this. What happens is they get dipped in all your paint and they end up where you don't want them. So always have your tissue screwed up thoroughly like this. If you was going to sketch, I'm not going to sketch this, that's fine. Just look for, I call it the underlying abstraction. What I mean by that is the shapes. So if the horizon line was roughly in the center, it's just below center on this painting, that's one shape and another shape at the bottom. And then your buildings would be a shape, maybe a square, the mountains might be a triangle. That is the underlying abstraction. I would just sketch them in lightly. As I say, I'm not going to do it this, I'm going straight in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put on this yellow, just like this. And then I'm not going to leave it long. I'm going to start to rub that in with my tissue and blend it. And straight away, you start to get some sense of the picture. I'm going to change my tissue round. Now, this is a cool yellow. Cool colours tend to recede back in the picture, so they look further away. And that's my intention with this initially. But I will end up warming this front up to bring it forwards later. And pushing that in. And this is a process in itself that I find wonderful. You know, you can just paint, keep painting like this. And as I'm rubbing the edges, the paint's a lot thinner. And thin paint goes back in painting. I hope you can see that on screen. Never worry about the crumbs of the tissue coming off. What we do is when the painting's finished, we either get a clean tissue or a clean part and just rub them off. That's the first part. I glance at the picture to make sure there's no more cool yellow on there. And there probably is a little bit just on the hill at the back over here. So I'm just going to put that on and blend that in. Then I'm going to wipe with my tissue the paint off my brush. And it's important to wipe all the paint off what you can, never to just dip it in your spirit. The other thing is if I want to clean the brush in the spirit, I don't dip the brush in and start wriggling around in the spirit like people do with watercolors, because all you do is contaminate that straight away. What I do is I dip in. I'm not dipping in because I don't need to. I lift out and I wipe with the tissue. Dip in, lift out, wipe with the tissue, then get a clean tissue and give it a good scrub. That's all I really need now, because what I'm going to do, I'm going to warm up part of the picture with a little bit of the warm yellow. So I'm going to pick up my palette. We'll wipe some of the cool yellow off, not all of it. I'm going to use the same brush and I'm going to take the warm yellow, that's the cadmium medium, and add it into that. And use the same tissue, and I'm going to warm up the front of the painting here, and you'll see straight away that it brings this part of the painting close to you at the bottom. Now I'm going to rub that in. And knocking it back and rubbing it right in, because I don't want it to stand out like a sore thumb. I just want I want it to bring the bottom of my painting forward a little bit. Okay. And then I'm going to wipe my brush again. I'm not going to bother cleaning it. I'm going to wipe most of this paint up, leaving me a small amount, and I'm going to take my yellow ochre and add that to this. This is going to be for my mountains on either side. So the mountains come just above the halfway point, down, and think of it, it's just a triangle like that. Get some paint on, same tissue, start to rub it in. And you can leave, you don't have to rub right back. Where you can see some dark areas, you can leave them in if you wish, because it creates a little bit more movement in the mountain, in the hill, in the sky, if you do the sky like that. And I'm going to go back in at the bottom, just put a few more soft marks. And just blend them a little bit. I want that to be seen. I'm just going to pull down slightly and blend that, because this is wet water that we've got. So we're just pulling the mountain down into the water and blending across. Then we'll do the same in this side. Now we've got two mountains. We've got one just at the back, at the top, that you can hardly see. It's a little bit cool. And then we've got this one in the front. So again, I'm just going to cool that down a little bit with a little bit of lemon. I will be going over this with a different colour. I'll explain it later. Blend that in. And then this hillside here. Yeah, it's just a triangle. And you can see why it looks like a watercolour. Now, if you've got good gesso with nice chalk in it, you can actually do a watercolour on a canvas. So because Turner started off as a watercolourist, he would have understood that. And he always, well, his old dad would have done his gessoing for him. He says that his old dad started all his paintings and finished all his paintings. And that's a great thing, because his dad would make his canvas for him. He would mix his paint for him out of pure pigment and oil. And he would frame them and varnish them afterwards. So yeah, it'd be great to have someone to do that for us, wouldn't it? Okay, let's have a look. I'm going to wipe this brush off, and I'm going to look at getting these blues in now. And again, we've got cool blues and warm blues. The cools tend to go back and the blues tend to come forwards. So we want this sky to go right back, and then we want to bring the castle forwards with this warm blue. So I'm just going to wipe my board. Change my tissue. I'm going to use a different brush to save me cleaning this. Just going to pick up a flat brush, medium, spirit, the cool cobalt blue, and I'm even going to put a little spot of white into that. Now, you've got to be careful with white in painting. It can really kill your painting. The reason I'm using the white here is just to keep it cool. The problem with white is it's very opaque, and opaque paint comes forwards in a painting. So if you get that really wrong, your painting doesn't work. Let's have a look how this works. A little bit more white, a bit more blue. I'm going to put that on. Now, Turner did a lot of scribbling in his work. So what he would do is he would spin his brush round like this. You'll probably find Turner didn't hold a paintbrush like a pen. That's generally when you're doing detail because you're trying to be precise. He probably held it. Some people know it as the candle hold. Now, none of us hold candles anymore. So probably more like the hose pipe hold where you'd be watering the garden, and you can spin your brush around in rapid circles like this and create some really, really amazing effects with the skies. This is something I do all the time, and again I can rub back with my tissue. Now, initially I'm doing the white area before I start to just let it blend with the edges of everything else. We're just blending now, and you can get that sense, that feeling. I might be a bit sad, I get a little bit excited about this when I can start to feel the painting happening, and I can decide whether to pull the sky more into this cool yellow or take the yellow out into the sky. It's something that just happens whilst you're painting. So a little bit more cool paint.
While you work on this, Mark, Teresa is asking, presumably Turner will have used Prussian blue, as cobalt is a more modern paint.
Turner used cobalt blue. Right. Cobalt blue came out in France first, and Turner got to use it about 2 years after it was. But yes, Prussian blue was one of his favourite colours. But yes, he would have used cobalt also. I think it was. I think he started using cobalt 1837. But that's just out of my mind. I'd have to check that. It could be 47. Does that answer the question? But yes, he did use cobalt, but Prussian blue definitely. Well done.
Thank you.
And also, Turner wanted anything that was new, that was in. If a new colour come in, he had to have it. He had to try it. I don't know what he would have thought of acrylics. He probably would have tried them. But he would try anything. Okay, so that's my first hit on the sky. I'm then going to come into the land area just here, which is a very similar colour, and into the water on either side here, which is very similar, just a little bit warmer in the water. What you find in your painting, if you've got warm and cool colours, you get more depth in the painting. So I'm just going to add a little bit more medium. Splash of spirit. Still using the cool, but with a little bit of ultramarine blue in it, a bit of warm. Okay, and we're going to go from, so this is where the line of the castle's going to be. So you can see the blue is going over the yellow. And again, this yellow is drying already. And that's partly because of the spirit, but partly because of the chalk in the gesso, sucking it all in. The chalk gives good tooth for the paint. Now, when I'm blending with my tissue, the water here, I always finish it off horizontally. If I'm doing a sky, I'll probably keep going in circles, but for the water, I'll finish it off horizontally because I want that feel of the water. I'm going to want this up a little bit more here. And then we're going to go to the other side. Again, you can see I just put it on in the general shape. This is a triangle. And then blend it in. Now, if you're not used to this technique and you use too much spirit, what will happen is all the yellow will lift. So don't be frightened about it. Have a go. I'll show you as if I'm making a mistake. So I've probably got a little bit too much spirit. I'm thinking I'm putting blue on. Then all of a sudden, I'm taking the paint back to the white, and it's not a good feeling. And it's often when you've gone for a brew, you've cleaned your brush, and you've got some spirit left in the ferrule. And when you mix your paint in, you come back on, the spirit comes out. Well, all you have to do is wet it and start blending it again. Blend the paint that's there, or mix a small amount of the same colour and go back in. So I've just done it. I never cleaned my brush. Clean that off. So what I'm going to do now is look at getting the mountains in and the castle. Now, again, like warm colours and cool colours, if you understand the colour wheel, it helps to develop any painting. And if you think of the colour wheel, I think of the colour wheel as a child would. And I say we're stood on the cool green grass. Green is at the bottom. I just turn the colour wheel around a little bit. I say that the sun is warming up the yellow cornfield. As the sun rises, it's orange in the sky, getting warmer until it's red hot at 12 o'clock. Red hot, red, opposite green grass. As the sun starts to set, it starts to cool down to a purple violet colour until it reaches the cool blue of the sea. And if you get that in your head, you'll understand that you can desaturate colours and you can understand what the complementary colour is of something. And all that comes to light as you get used to painting. So if I've got a colour in the tube that's bright red, so we'll say this is a red iron oxide, it's Venetian red. That is the colour. I can't make it more saturated. I can't make it more red. That is the colour. I can go and get another red that's more saturated than that. For instance, I've got cadmium vermilion here, extremely warm, extremely red. I can't saturate that anymore. That's the colour. But all these colours you can desaturate, take the brightness, the chromatic colour down a little bit by adding the complementary. So if I put a spot of green with that, it will make it less red. And that's important because also toning it down, it's kind of cooling it down. Okay, so if I chop the colour wheel down one part and I roll it out, I've got red at one end, and then it goes red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and right at the other end is purple. And that there, in that stretch, is classed as the coolest of the colours, which seems a bit daft because it's got red in, and you think red, well, that's warm, but that's considered a cool colour. And if you look at the horizon far away, you tend to squint your eyes and look, and it's got a tinge of bluey purple about it, as this picture has. So we need to create a little bit of a purple, but not too much. So what I'm going to do is take my cool blue. I'm going to take a small amount of the red. You'll notice I never dip my brushes right in the middle of the paint. It's always on the edge. And add that in to create a slight purple tinge. There we go. And I'm going to go straight in. Now, I could try it on the edge to have a look at the colour, but it's fine. So I'm going to go straight in now. I'm going to create this hill at the back. So it's where I put that yellow earlier, there. I'm just looking at shape again. I'm going to blend again, all blended. I think this is my most used tool for this painting. It's the tissue. You can actually, when you're doing any painting like this, you could go out and paint anything, and you could just put one hill in front of another hill, just warm it up as you come along and drop down, and it's amazing what depth you'll get in that painting. And then we've got a slightly warmer area just underneath here. I'm going to use the same colour, just slightly thicker. Now I could take that back with a tissue, or I could take that back with a nice soft brush. I'm going to use the soft brush so you can see the difference in that. It's important to have a nice soft brush and allow the bristles to bend. Otherwise, what you're doing is you're scraping the paint off. If you're going back and two, you're putting the paint on, you're scraping the paint off. So just allow the bristles to just tickle around the painting, and really, really soft, and that will take that down for you. There we go. I'm just going to touch the tissue on the bottom, soften it up, and I'm going to go to the other side. It's exactly the same colour, it just comes underneath. This time I'm going to use my tissue because it's not as strong. Tone it back. Now I am aware of the fact that this needs warming up a lot and needs to be a lot bluer, as does this, but I'm going to actually go in and put the castle in now with this hill behind, I'm doing that just because of the time factor, and we don't want to run over. I want you to see the whole process. What Turner would often do is paint the picture like this, call it the underpainting, and do the exact same thing when it's dry to create further depth. Thinking again like a filter. You could paint a painting, for instance, in yellow, and then you could put another blue tone over the top of it to create like a green color. Okay, so I'm going to now get a little bit of warmer blue with the ultramarine. I'm going to mix it into this paint, so I'm not wasting nothing. There is a little tinge of purple about this castle. I'm going to put the tiniest dot of red in. And again, I'm just looking at shapes. My first shape I see there is like a square. Now, the sun is almost behind this castle to this side and shining across. This side of the castle is a little bit lighter. The front of it's quite dark. So I'm just going to put that in here now. So I'm looking at a square. Like that. I'm going to soften that down with my tissue. Again, you could do this with your brush. If you ever go to see this painting, you'll see there is areas of impasto and quite a lot of them. And that's why you can see also that he's done it very, very thin and then built it up. And we all know with oil paint, it's flat over lean. So this being lean paint, being very thin paint, I can go straight over this and paint thicker paint. But I couldn't put, if I went too thick, I couldn't paint over the top. I have to let it dry and then paint it again. So I'm just looking at that now. I've got this shadow underneath, this reflection in the water. I'm just pulling down. And I'm going to blend across again because it's water, always. Okay, right. I'm going to cool this side of the castle down a little bit. I'm just using some of my cool blue that I made earlier, mixed with the warm blue on here. There we go. Now I'm getting a general feeling for the painting now. I can start to build on it. So I could class this as my underpainting. So now I can repeat the process throughout to get those extra depths. Now I tend to myself warm up the corners of my sky to bring them forward. Turner hasn't done that with this this painting. Whether he intended to later, who knows, we don't know. The other thing in a painting, we've all heard of the golden medium or the rule of thirds. So the rule of thirds would probably say that the cow is the focal point because that's in the thirds. But Turner would like to push you out of that comfort zone. You've probably heard of the expression fried egg. And what that fried egg is we can look at a fried egg and the shiny bits in the middle. It's a nice, easy painting to look at. One of the reasons for the rule of thirds is to take you slightly out of that comfort zone, but not too much to make it uncomfortable. That would just make you explore the painting. The third might be here, here, up here, or over here. Just enough to make you start looking at the painting. With Turner, he might put it right up here, it doesn't matter. his focal point could be where he wanted to. He changed things that suited him and not what he was looking at. It's what he wanted to create. I wish we could all just do that. Amazing. So I'm just going to stand back for 1 second so I can see what I'm doing, because I'm still on the side of the painting. Yes, I'm very happy with that. I can see that the original, it's got a lot of darker areas on it. So I'm going to start to build them in. I will attempt to put the cow in later. The cow is an amazing painting. If you zoom into it, it's almost like a square box with a triangle and then just 3 legs. It's amazing how he's done it. So I'm just going to darken things up a little bit and build on them a little bit. If you zoom into the castle close, it's sat on a triangle with just the castle at the top. So I'm going to also do that. So there's my triangle coming in. I'm not going to blend that away yet. I'm going to leave that. I'm going to start to warm this up here. And I can scumble if I wish, but I will finish off like this because it's water. This scumbling around with my brush like this just allows me to get more paint on the canvas into the tooth of the canvas. And if you look at the etchings, you can see that this water goes around the back of this big hill here, and there's actually a house on this hill, but not in this particular painting. And I'm going to warm this side up. Turner's father would have mixed all of his paints for him. Obviously not when Turner worked away, he'd mix his own. And watercolours was, as you know, one of his strongest things. But when they started to use the oil paints to paint in the field, they would have had small pig's bladders of oil paint that he would have had to have paste to squeeze onto his palette whilst working outdoors. You can imagine how difficult that was. It was only during the mid to late 1800s that they started to develop the metal tube, which must have been a godsend for all artists. And that's where we started with the impressionists, because they could take those tubes of paint outside. That's where the ferrule started to come in, where they started to manufacture brushes in mass, and people could just buy the brushes rather than make their own. I'm just going to stand back a second again. Right, fairly happy with that. I need to tone this down. Everything needs toning down. I'm going to scumble this guy a little bit. I'm going to scumble around the edge of the corners just to warm them up, to bring the edges towards you. It makes this look further back. Sorry if my arm gets in the way when I go into this corner here. I'm going to take that little bit of old mix that I've got. I tend to keep my paint on my palette so that I can use it. I don't get rid of everything all the time. And I tend to try to draw strings of paint down that I can use rather than having dots of paint all over my palette. The cleaner you keep it, the easier it is for yourself. And if you keep your paints in the same order every time, you get to know where they are and it's much easier to paint. I'm just going to warm this up at the back here where it's you see now mainly with the brush rather than the tissue. When you're doing paintings like this, copying somebody else's painting, you should never get yourself bogged down with having to be too perfect. Create it and think of everything you do as a learning curve, and paint for yourself rather than others, and it's much easier. When you start to paint because you want to show others, you're putting yourself under a lot of pressure. Just going to put this mountain in the back again here, just soften it up. And adding some texture to this land mass over here. So I'm just going to put in a touch of the yellow ochre. It could be raw sienna would be good for this as well. I can see small details in the hill on this side, and there's a really dark detail at the back. So I'm going to put that in and look at it, and then see. I might take it right back. Sometimes you've got to try things, and there's a couple of small dark areas in this land mass. And again, when you do it, it might stand out a little bit too much. All you've got to do then is blend them away and send them back in the painting. Hello.
Don't mind us.
No, not at all, not at all. So I'm just going to put these marks in and then have a look. So straight away, I can see that I need to tone them down a little bit, and they're just too strong. So I just grab the tissue and gently wipe them, mix them with the paint that's on there. Again, it's hard to do because most of this paint is already drying. People say, my oil paints take forever to dry. And yes, they will if you put them on really, really thick. Or if you use a lot of linseed oil, because linseed oil is a drying agent, but it's a slow drying agent, so it'll make your paintings dry slower. You can use other things like cobalt dryers. You put a tiny amount in your linseed and it'll make it dry quicker. Or you can use different oils to make your paintings dry quicker.
Actually, Mark, I don't know if this answered the question already, but Teresa was asking, what is the difference between using linseed oil and modern alkali base?
Alkali.
Thank you.
Yes, alkali oils are quicker drying. They're refined oils, often can be plant-based, and as linseed oil is plant-based, obviously, and they're refined. So what happens is, and they're very good, they just smell a bit strange, it'll make your painting dry a lot quicker. So I would say, if you want to, yeah, I'd recommend. The only thing is, if you're doing certain paintings, for instance, if you were doing a portrait a la prima, then you don't want your paint to be drying quick because you want to be able to blend it. So don't use it in that sense. You've also got things like poppy seed oil and walnut oil. The poppy seed oil dries quicker, the walnut oil dries slower, so you can try them as well. But alkyd mediums, certainly use them, excellent. Liquid do one that's very, very good. I used to manufacture my own, but since lockdown I've not been able to get hold of my paints. I manufacture my paints myself, but I've not been able to get hold of the pigments, so I've had to slow down a little bit on that. But alkyd mediums Perfect. Use them. Don't be frightened of them. Yeah. Right. I'm going to go back into this now and try and make it a little bit more misty, like Turner's, and then we'll get this little cowling down the bottom. I'll try and get the water to look a little bit more wet, and part of that is when I start to add a little bit more white to the paint. As I say, always be careful with the white. Leave it to the last if you can, because once it's in there, you can't do a lot with it. So the other thing that you could do, if you finish a painting like this and you want it to look a little bit more ghostly, you could go over the top of it with a white, something like a tin white, or I can't think at the moment, but it'll come to me which white you could use. Zinc white right over the top, but you don't want the zinc white underneath your painting, because zinc white can cause problems in the paint, trying to push the paint off. So zinc white over the top afterwards, but not underneath your painting. So let's just develop this a little bit further now. Let's get this sky going a little bit better. I'm going to clean my brush. And again, all I'm going to do is dip it in, take it out, wipe it. Dip it in, take it out, wipe it. That keeps my spirit clean. I've wiped my palette clean here now. I'm going to take some white, blue, cool blue again initially. And I'm going to scumble in. I'm going to pull this into the yellow now. So the yellow, that's really dry. And I'm going to pull this blue right into it. So I'm going to reduce it down so it makes your eyes start to look towards it and not at the whole thing. If this was one big yellow spot, you just look at it and that's it. If I reduce that down, you start to search in. So I'm going to start in the corners. And spin my brush, bring it in, and then go very gently when I get to the yellow. So I'm tickling the edge of it, and you'll see it dull down. I hope that shows on the camera. So I'll just do this side so you can see the difference from that side. You should still be able to see the yellow through the blue. And I'm going to come over the top, take a bit more paint. And into the yellow. These multiple filters. I could spend 8-12 hours in a day doing this. I paint a lot of skies in my studio, and it's just a dream. You get carried away and just drift into nowhere. At the moment, I like to think that Mr. Turner is here helping me. Right, I'm just going to tickle the top of this castle. I don't want to lose it completely, because it's not a hard line, but it's not completely blended. And then it comes out from the side. It's a lot more blended. Hello. And I'm looking at shapes, value, colour. Well, a little bit more warm blue in there. It's where I feel the painting starting to come together now. I mean, it's amazing when you think about it. We paint a painting. We all expect to paint a painting in a couple of hours and it's finished. We don't think about going back to it and working on it. Now, realistically, if this was my painting to sell, I would probably work on this for a week, every day, doing different layers. I would go back over the top and create another layer. The thinnest layers being around here, the thicker layers being on the edges to pull the sky over your head, pull the water towards your feet. And I'm just going to take this hill off to the side here. I'm going to go back in that little dark mark that I can see on the painting. I'm wondering if that's the house in the original. Yeah.
Might be.
You don't know. You really don't know. It's quite amazing. Then I'm going to warm this up again. But I'm going to put more white in now. The reason I'm putting more white in now at the bottom is because white is opaque, and opaque paint tends to come forwards, it comes towards you. And when you think of white, as I said before, when I had this white canvas, light bounces straight out. So if I was painting a picture of my own face, where the cheeks are and the nose and the chin, anything that comes forward, I would put white paint into that to make it opaque, to make the light come forwards quicker. So these areas look closer to you. So I'm going to put a lot more white into this. Paint down here. You might feel, even on the camera, you might feel that that comes forwards. And again, I'm scumbling in this there, but because it's water, I will finish it off horizontally. It makes a difference. Yeah. Go to the same on this side. You notice now I'm not using any spirit. So it's that fat over lean again. I've got very lean paint. Now I'm going in a little bit fatter. I'm not even using any medium at the moment. I'm just using paint. When I go back into the center of the painting, I'm gentler. I'm making the paint much thinner. Hello. And going back into my castle. Now I'm looking at my castle. I've got a blown up picture of the castle that I can glance at as well. It's quite amazing. It even looks like some of the painters run on his original. It's fantastic. Let's just look at that. So it's just blocks of colour, really, painting in large blocks, medium blocks, small blocks, and then right at the end, you look at detail. And in this painting, there's not a lot of detail. I think the real detail is just the cow down here. But anything that you see, little darks, little lights, put them in. So we're just gonna I'm going to turn that down a little bit. Okay, so we have a look at getting this cow in. Now, at the beginning, I said to you, if I'm doing large blocks, loosely like this, I tend to hold my paintbrush. I grab it with my finger and thumb. I grip it like this, and then I can scumble, I can paint in like this. But big challenge for a cow, so I'm going to hold my paintbrush like a pen, so I can just put it in. And for the cow, it's a little bit on the red side, a browny red. So what I'm going to do, I'm still going to take a little bit of white, put it under the red, put a little bit of red into it. Probably a burnt sienna would even be a good colour for this, but I'm going to take some of my bistre and just put it into the edge. Just tone that down, have a look at it. Yeah, that's working. And again, I'm just looking at shape. Now, Turner has actually painted the cow in and the castles and everything, and then he's gone back over the whole of the painting with white paint. And if you zoom in to the cow, or if you go into the gallery to see it, you will see that it's got this real quite impasto, especially on his back, over the top, and all the water around has got a lot of impasto that actually look like it's been put on with either a palette knife or a large brush, but just literally just dragged across and allow the paint to just touch and stick to the canvas. So let's get our cow in. It's quite high up actually. Just going to wipe that paint off and put some more white in it. I've reverted back to the rough grip here, you'll note. Three-legged cow. And there's a reflection underneath. And again, with the reflections, you can always pull down and then brush across.
I'll zoom in so people should be able to see
Yeah.
the cow better.
Can you see that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Great, fantastic. Okay, that's the detail in the cow. It's nothing. It's almost like two triangles, almost a square block. And then he's just dragged the little legs down. And for the shadow, it's literally just put a couple of little marks and then brushed them through. And then when the white paint goes over the top, it'll make it a little bit more ghostly. So that's what I'm going to look at now. I'm going to get this very soft brush and I'm going to look at putting this final coat right over the top to give it that ghostly effect. Again, I'm going to stand back for a second just so I can see what I've done. It's always important in your work to keep standing back and looking at it. When you're at your work and you're working so close, you get too bogged down with the small detail. So just stand back, take a look. not too bad, not too bad. I can see I need to pull some more blue up here and some more blue into these hills down here. So I'll do them just before I put my soft white over. So you can see I've got the orangey yellow of this hill, but there's a lot more blue at the bottom of it. So I'm going to bring that in. Initially scumble. And take this yellow out of the top here. I'm just going to reduce this yellow in the sky. People say, you know, when do you know a painting's finished? It's mad, isn't it? It's when you're happy with it. And if you're not happy with it, keep taking it out and working on it. Because if you're not happy with it, the fear is, I can't go back to that painting, I'll spoil it. You might spoil it, but you'll go past spoiling it and create something new. So always pick your paintings back up and go back to them and try to improve them. I never worry about my paintings because I don't sell them. Generally don't sell them. It's only when I am going to sell my paintings that I do get a little bit worried. But what I tend to do is just paint over what I do. So I'm going to get some warmth in here, just a little bit. Trying to balance the painting up now before I go in with my white. And tone down areas. This is a little bit too strong here. I'll tone this down. It's almost a dry brush. There's a tiny little bit of blue in there. Okay, let's go in with the white. Soft brush, long bristles. White. So I'm lowering the brush. I need the paint in the bristles or they're not going to work. And as I say, white's opaque, comes forward. So I'm going to start in the corners again first. So I can have a look at how that affects. And then I'm going to come into the centre of the painting. Just show you, if you just look at this area here, how orangey yellow it is. Now I'm just going to go into the area, but what I'll do, I'll come from this area into it and watch the subtle change as I go, and you'll see what the white's doing. I'll try and keep my hand out of the way. Can you see that change in the not only the colour, the depth of the paint? Now the white, although white is opaque and wants to come forwards, it's not altering that coming forward so much, because you can still see the original colour through. It's just almost like I'm desaturating it, just creating that ghostly effect. And when I get to the bottom of it, I will let the white be a little bit stronger so it does affect it. It's coming forwards a little bit. I want this bottom of this hill to come forwards. Again, in the water, horizontally. Very soft, very gentle. Creating that ghostly effect. If you get an air on your work, just spotted one here, just use your brush. Not many times you want to use the brush in the wrong direction because it brings them. Just pick them off and wipe them away. Now I'm going into this yellow a little bit more and I'm putting this very soft white over the top of the yellow. If you want it to be very, very chromatic and very modern, you wouldn't bother doing this. You'd leave it there, that nice bright yellow. Just catching the edges of the castle. It's a lot easier when you're actually in the room with someone painting. It's a lot easier to see. I know because I do Zoom lessons online, and it's I have some regular students that also come to the studio, and they say there is a difference online because it still is quite 2D, other than seeing live, and that's a shame you can't get that. But I hope you get the general sense of what's happening and understand that when I'm saying, oh, paint comes forward, you can understand that. It's all a learning curve. It's something that you get better at with time. Right, there's a lot more white in this area here now as well. It's a lot thicker, so I'm going to bring that in now. Remember, this isn't the finished white. Turner will go in with quite thick paint over this afterwards. But it'd have to be really dry for him to do that. I'm just going to bring this little bit of blue in here, down here. Use my other brush. What I'm doing here now is I'm putting some fine lines of white paint to give you that effect of water. And small marks go back, large marks come forwards. If you've got a little break of water right at the back, it's going to be tiny, you can hardly see it. But when it comes forwards, it's going to be a lot bigger, slight exaggeration there, but you can see the difference. And that again is giving you depth in your painting. Now I'm just going to put on here, on top of this cow, the thickness of the paint with a palette knife that Turner has actually used on his you'll see a difference straight away. And it's amazing how thick that paint is. So I'm just going to draw this white paint out, keep it nice and flat. Like my palette knife. This is not really a palette knife. This is a palette knife. A palette knife is flat for mixing paint on the palette. This really is a painting knife. It's got this bend in it, so that when you're painting with it, your hand isn't touching the support. I'm going to just get my painting knife at 45 degrees, and I'm just going to pull forwards, and it creates a little roll of paint, and then I'm going to slide it off. So I've got this little roll of paint. If I pull and lift, I get all this spiky stuff, which is not what I want. I've got no control. That'll be all over the painting. So I have to smooth it out, wipe off, pull, get a bead and slide. A nice bead of paint. With that nice bead of paint, I can make a very thin line by having the knife on its edge, or I can drop the knife down as a nice thin line, or I can drop the knife down to get a thicker line. These are all techniques that Turner would have used. So because this is only a small cow, I'm only going to try and get that paint on there. That's kind of the thickness of the paint. I'm just going to put a few more lines on here of the thickness of the paint that's over the top of all of this. It's surprising how thick it is. I'm not going to put that all over my painting at the moment. It's just so you can actually see the difference. Right, I'm just going to stand back for a second so we can have a look, and then we'll answer any questions. That's not too bad. They've got the light in the window.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just noticing when we stand back there, it's quite a nice thing because we've got the window next to us. The actual light is shining through the window, and we can see it shining through the back, and it's lighting up this area. That's quite nice. So I'm not going to go any further with that now. I'd like any questions, and then we can answer them. But what I would do is I would scrape this off here initially and blend it all in, let this dry, and then go back in, and I would paint the whole thing again to give me that depth. So I'd be looking at filters of paint, of the light going through the blue, through the yellow to the white, the light going through the orange, through the blue, through the yellow to the white, and bouncing back and creating that depth. As you can see here, this bit's standing out now because of the impasto, because of the thick, because of the white, and the warmth in the cow. Any questions?
Feel free to write them in the chat. I have more of I think a practical question is, what do you do with these paintings if you don't sell them?
Paint over the top, or if, I mean, with this one, if Turner's House wanted it, I'd finish it off a little bit better, and I'd give that to them. I teach a lot of autistic children. I use my old paintings to let them paint over the top of them. And on the odd occasion, I do sell my work, but rarely. Yeah. I'll just take this paint off actually by now.
Any more questions? So in the meanwhile, I will just say how different it is from watercolor painting. You know, I mean, I used to do it because I've studied in an Academy of Fine Art, so in an art school. But lately, I've been working a lot with watercolors, and just fascinating to see it again, how it works. Oil painting. They ask whether varnishing is necessary all the time.
So varnishing, it's amazing. No one bothers to varnish these days, and the varnish is there to protect the painting. Now, years and years ago, Turner painted paintings that he wanted people to see after his death. He was interested in, he bequeathed all his work to what's now Tate Britain, and he wanted it preserving. The varnish protects the painting. You must let it dry. If you're using the alkyd medium, like one lady said she was using alkyd medium, the painting will be dry, ready for varnishing probably in a couple of months. If you're using linseed oil, I would say leave it a year before you varnish it. Now, the other problem with that is, if you want to sell a painting, you can't leave it a year to varnish it because you'll be wanting to sell it. So you don't varnish it, but you tell the person it's not varnished. You could then also offer a service of, you can return it to me in a year and I'll varnish it for a price. Have a goal in mind. It's going to take you at least an hour, an hour's wage plus your varnish. So don't be silly and think, oh no, I'll varnish it for nothing because they bought the painting. It's an extra service. It's an extra coat of paint. I recently had a painting brought to me by it's a painting from a chap called W.H. Vernon. It was painted in 1846. It had a great big hole in the middle, and I was asked by an art centre if I could repair it for them, but they didn't want the varnish to be taken off. And I said to them, no, you need the varnishing taken off to see what the original's like. No, we want it as it is. So I repaired the painting and I repainted it, and I took it back to them, and they said, oh, that's wonderful, thanks very much. Can you take the varnish off, please? I then had to take the varnish off and then repaint the painting because the area I painted was a different colour. So that's the other thing. You can, when your painting gets older, you can take varnish off and revarnish and it looks like new again. But if you don't, your painting will slowly go duller. The other thing is, if you're using pigments, if you're using oil paints that have got good quality pigments and oil in them and almost nothing else, you're going to keep the vibrancy of that painting. If you buy cheap quality paints, and that'll probably come from China, not that that is some of the paints that come from China are really, really good quality, but you need to make sure you get that. What you find is that there's about 80% chalk and a lot of other fillers within the paint tube, and that's what you're paying for. And you'll find once you've painted them, even after a month or so, they seem to dull down and they're just going to go duller and duller and duller. So I would say buy yourself quality, artist quality oil paint if you want to be a painter. If you're painting for fun and you're not concerned about selling your paintings, then just use student quality paints. They're a lot cheaper.
I will join to this question. Is there a palette that you suggest for as a starting point, a range of colors? The one that you use today are a good point to start for any kind of painting?
Yes. So what to start with? You need a white. Let's go through them. We'll get to white. White paint is a must because you can make a tint of any color by adding white to it. So if you've got blue, you can make a tint of blue by adding white to it. If you've got red, you can make a tint of red, which is pink, by adding white to it. I would say get black. Black, you add a small amount and it gives you a shade of that colour. Obviously, if you mix it with things like yellow ochre, you'll get a green colour. So you need to understand the black. People say, I mix my own black, so I don't buy black. And I say to them, what colour do you get? And they go, black. Well, you don't. You get a dark purple colour, or you get a muddy brown colour, because you're mixing primary colours all together to get, and then you would use the word brown, add brown to it to get your black. So I say, when you mix your paint the next time, what colour do you get? Because it's slightly different. When you use black and you get used to black in small quantities, it's brilliant. It just changes that value down, tones it down, and I could use it in here now in these blues, and it would be a great thing to use. So get yourself a black, get yourself a warm blue, ultramarine blue. So blue, the primary colours, one of them being blue. I would say get a warm blue, ultramarine blue. I would say get a warm yellow, something like a cadmium yellow, and get yourself a red. It could be a cool red or a warm red. Alizarin crimson is a good one, or something like a cadmium vermilion, a very, very bright red that you can desaturate, tone down. And there are your colours. So we've got white, yellow, blue, red, and a black. If you're not going to use black, get yourself a brown, Van Dyke brown, or a Bistra or something like that, because you can use that to tone those values down. Now, because we've got red, and I said you would use green to desaturate it, well, there's your green. So you've got that in, and that's all the colours you need. You definitely need some type of medium, an oil to help you spread that, to water it down as such, because sometimes you really want to make it thin. So you can use an alky medium, or you can use linseed oil, or any other painting medium. And you don't really need spirit. I use turpentine in the studio when I'm on my own, because I love the way it works, and I even like the smell of it. And with turpentine, you can smell it, and if you've got too much of it, you get slightly light-headed. So you know you've got to go and get some fresh air. As I say, the problem with odorless mineral spirit, there's no effect. We don't know what it's doing, but there certainly is vapor coming off. It's just be wary of that. What you can do is wash your brushes in washing up liquid. So you wipe off as much as you can. You get a tin, something like this, with some washing up liquid in, and scrub your brush round in that washing up liquid, and then wash that out in warm water. And you can put the warm water in a jar and clean it out and squeeze it out onto some tissue. That's fine. There's no real harm in putting that in the sink, unlike acrylics, which you should never wash an acrylic brush in the sink, as everybody does. The reason for that, it's full of chemicals, it's full of plastics, and you wash them down the sink and they can't be filtered through the system. Estrogen's in that, it comes back in the drinking water, and it's known for giving breast cancer. So I would say never wash your brushes, acrylic brushes, in the sink. Have separate jars. Rinse your brushes out in the separate jars and squeeze them with kitchen paper so they're as dry as you can get them. That's all you'll need to do. And then let those jars settle, and then you can pour the water off into a new jar and use that for cleaning your acrylic brushes. and you've got at the bottom some sediment, which is pigment that you can use to paint with. So just dip your brush in your painting medium, put it in that pigment and carry on using it rather than putting it down the sink.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Not many people do.
Yeah, I used to do
No.
it in the sink,
Yeah.
but they were like particular sink.
Everybody cleans
But-
the paint brushes in the sink.
Yeah.
It's easier. but
Wow.
You shouldn't. Not so.
Can you repeat about the alternative for the linseed oil again?
Yeah, you can use alkyd mediums and liquid do one, an alkyd medium that works the same as linseed oil. The only thing is that it's a quick drying oil. You have to be very careful. You can't use things like rapeseed oil because that's not a drying agent. And what would happen is your painting would never dry. But you can use poppy oil and walnut oil. They're common ones. You can also buy a cobalt drying agent. It's a liquid, slightly blue, cobalt. And if you put a little pipette of that into your linseed oil, it will speed the drying process up. So, you can have your painting drying as quick as acrylics. I've just done a class in Warrington where we used egg tempera for the underpainting, and then we're going to put a thin coat of oil over the top. So all you do with that is you break the egg, put the white of the egg into one pot. I then put the eggshells into water for a few minutes, and then I tear the membrane out of them because it goes smelly, and I crush those eggshells up to use in my gesso. I then get the yolk of the egg, which is in a little sack, break open the sack and tip that into a vessel, get rid of the sack because it goes smelly, add water to the yolk, and if you've got pure pigments, then just mix them with your water and you paint your picture just the same way as we've been painting here, and that will be dry straight away, literally within minutes. And then you can go straight over the top of that with your oil paints. You could also, if you do use acrylics, paint the painting in acrylics so it's dry, and then go over the top in oils to give you that depth. And that will give you a lot more depth. But you can't paint anything else over oils. So you can paint charcoal, watercolor, acrylic, and then oils over the top, but not the other way around. Does that make sense? Good. Any more questions?
Thank you, Mark. It's not about the technique, but they're asking if you do watercolor.
I paint in watercolors. Yes, I don't teach in watercolors. I love watercolors. They're simple. So if I'm going to go outdoors, I would suggest generally taking a sketch pad and a pencil, and it's amazing what you can create. We're very good at using a pencil, which in itself is black, on our white paper, black and white, and creating shades of grey by gently drawing or blending with our finger or pressing harder. And we're used to that. We're not used to doing it as a painting, but if you get yourself a black and white, you could create a picture with a dry brush method by drawing with a brush. You'd be surprised at what you've got. I've got 10 minutes. I'd like to give a demonstration of something. Can I do that?
Yeah.
I'm just going to put another panel in front of this and give you a little demonstration of something that will help in that black and white type of idea.
Do you need any help?
No, I'm fine. I'll just use this. Put that one there. I use it. Okay, I've got a piece of MDF board here, and it's got 5 coats of gesso on there. I'm just going to place that on here. What I'm going to do, I've got a stick of graphite, and I'm just going to draw a circle on here. Okay. I'm going to take some black paint and some white paint. I'm going to take a small brush. Now, let's say that the light, which it is passing from this window here in this direction. If you get used to understanding values, lights and darks, on the value scale, there is a scale of 0 to 9. So in effect, it's 10 values. And you don't need to use any more values than that in painting. And you can quite often just use 5. I always say, think of the lowest one as 0 because it's the lowest figure and it's dark. It's at the bottom. It's dark, like it's under the ground where it's dark. And the highest one is 9. And think it's high, like high in the sky where white clouds are. So the mid value would be grey, black and white, 50-50. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint white at 45 degrees because that's the light that's coming in. I'm just going to go across. You might not see it. I'm trying to put it on fairly thick so you can see it.
I'm zooming in.
Yeah, zoom in. So that's 1/3 in white, slightly dirty because I've caught the edge of the pencil. What I'm then going to do is create a grey by adding black to my right. And the centre third I'm going to do in grey. And then the bit behind the back of this, I'm going to paint the last third in black. Now, when you look at that, that looks nothing like a sphere. It's flat. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to wipe my brush and I'm going to gently scumble these together, thinking that the low value recedes back, the high value comes forward. So I'm going to leave a spot around here of high value where the light's hitting it, I want that to come forwards. Everything else I'm going to blend. So I'm going to, and you'll watch it start to turn, start to form. So I start to blend my black into my grey, into the white. I'm going to go round the edge of the sphere with this grey dark colour to send the back of it away. I'm going to allow that white patch and everything else I'm going to blend together. And you can see that it starts to create form. So you would use this technique for creating a face, an eyeball. So you can see already that is starting to form. If I got a softer brush and went in with a softer clean brush and blended it a little bit more, you can see that it makes a better job of it. Let me just blend around there. don't want any hard edges. I know that's not a perfect sphere, but I am stood on the side of it. Now, there you go. Now, the other thing you've got to remember is with shadow, if I've got this light coming in at this angle, I need to drop something that's at the same angle down to the edge of my sphere, and I will see that my shadow actually comes slightly on this side, keeping the same angle here. I will see that my shadow comes right over here. Now, what you've got to be careful is different times of the day, the shadow is longer or shorter. So about noon, it's about 45 degrees. Then this item that you've painted needs to sit in the shadow, not on it. If you sit on it, it looks like it's floating. What I'm going to do then is I'm just going to use a little bit of tissue to soften the edges of the shadow so it looks more like a shadow. Finally, you've got to remember when you're painting that the sun and the light hits the surface of whatever is on it and bounces back up, and you get a little bit of reflected light underneath. I'll exaggerate this slightly with the white. You get a little bit of reflected light underneath. Now, I just tone that down. Now, you'll note that I do touch my paint with my fingers, and there's no harm in that. Just always be aware of any paint that if you're using cadmiums, there is the cadmium in there, that if left on your skin will seep into your blood system. So always clean your hands. What I have is baby wipes with aloe vera in them at the ready, and I always keep wiping the paint off my hands. But that's understanding values. You can do that in any colour, and that's what I'm thinking about all the time when I'm painting my paintings. So when you look at Norham Castle, you should see depth in it. I hope that's working on the lens. So let's just summarise what we've actually done in the manner of Turner. Partly we're in his house. How beautiful is that? We've got a support, be it canvas, MDF, plywood, whatever you're using. We've gessoed it. We gessoed it using some extra chalk and marble dust. We've mixed them into a roux and added them to our gesso. We've painted it over horizontally, vertically, and then random, and let that dry for a couple of hours. Then we've gone in with this imprimatura, which is our colour beginning. And we've used cool yellows because cool goes back. We've used warm yellows because the warms come forwards. We've used cool blues and warm blues. I know the castle is in the background, but we've used the warm blue on the castle because we want you to see it. We want it to come forwards a little bit. But everything around it is cool, so it sends it back. We've looked at the underlying abstraction of shapes, oblongs, circles, triangles, and that's how we built the picture. We've worked from large blocks to medium blocks to small blocks to detail. We will let this dry, and then we will come back to the painting and go over the whole painting again. You don't have to do that. That is just one method. If you're painting in alla prima, thick, wet paint, you wouldn't do that. But Turner's technique was the indirect method of painting, by painting thin coats of paint and building them up. Indirect method. The direct method is the alla prima method that the Impressionists, people like Monet, would would use. But you've got to remember that even Monet was inspired by Turner when he went to London and he walked around the gallery and he saw Turner's painting of the Houses of Parliament and paintings like that, and he just went, that's how I want to paint. So we've all learned something. I hope you've enjoyed the session. It's only 2 hours long. It's difficult when you're online. It's much easier when you're in the class. You can ask questions and you can physically see what's going on. But I hope you all have a go at this, be it a small, tiny one or a large one, and it would be nice to see them. So thanks very much and take care.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you everyone to, sorry, I will show my face again. Thank you everyone for joining it again. I really hope you enjoyed it. I can see Mark a lot of compliments, so thank you very much. And again, as a reminder, the recording will be shared with you later on. And also, if you would like to meet Mark in person and have a look and paint along with him this time, on Friday 5th of November, we have an in-person workshop from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. £60 a ticket with all material included. I will share more information about bookings and more information on what color you will be given, etc. And I hope to see you there. Thank you very much. Have a lovely day.